Shalom, this is Avraham Shira from Eretz Israel. Welcome to our Erev Shabbat talk. We are in Parshat Tisa of the Zohar HaKadosh, the holy book of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his students. And the parsha opens with three rabbis traveling on the road from Tiberia to Tzipori, which is a several-day journey by donkey. And they see two other rabbis that they know, that they learn with, all of them students of the master, Rabbi Shimon. And the three stop and say, look, we should join up with the divine presence. Let's wait for them. Let's join up with them. The divine presence is with them. And I started to think, now if you were walking down the street and you saw your friends and you said, wait, let's catch up with our friends, would you say, look, the divine presence, let's go to them? Would we have that consciousness? Would we have that perception? Would we have the proper filter to be able to see our friends, the people we love, the people we know, as carriers of the divine presence? It's a nice thought. If we actually thought it, it would be wonderful. If we said something, well, people might look at us a little funny. But the truth we see here in the coming words of the rabbis, he tells us, so Rabbi Eliezer brings a verse from Tehillim, the eyes of God are to the righteous, and his ears are to their cries. Now, the simple interpretation of the verse, of course, is that God looks upon the righteous and he hears when they are crying out for whatever reason. That we understand as a simple interpretation, but all you have to do is look at the grammar and see Einei Hashem El Tzadikim. The word El here is to. It's a preposition in grammar. But there are many prepositions in grammar. And you can interpret this as the eyes of God are in the tzaddikim. And the ears of God are in the hearing of their cries. Now, Rabbi Nachman teaches that the tzaddikim, the really righteous people, they hear the cries of other people even when no one hears a word. That we live on an integrated network of soul. We are connected across this planet whether we know it or not. And the chances are, most of us, we don't really know it. We might intellectually have come across the idea, but to experience it, that somebody around the planet is crying out and you pick it up because you're connected to them. That's what we're talking about here. And the eyes of God in the tzaddikim means that you look upon creation as God looks upon creation. Now, how does God look upon creation? I hope not the same way we do. I think that God looks upon creation with so much immense compassion and understanding, because every single person is at war with this evil inclination that, well, we have to take responsibility for creating it, but it preceded us by a few years, you know. Here comes some cats fighting away. So how do you look at somebody who's in the middle of a struggle? Why do we all love a good fight or a good sporting match? and we're rooting for the underdog because we want the person who is oppressed to win. We want the person who is the underdog to be victorious. And all of us are that being in the midst of that struggle. All of us are in the battle with an inclination that is not really us. It's not really where we're from. It's from a fallen place. And we fell into it. And now we got to get out. And the fight to get out demands compassion. And I think that might give us a little window of how Hashem looks at the world. Because he understands the difficulty of the fight. And he understands how long the fight has been. And what odds we have of being victorious. Well, without God's help, I don't know how many odds we have. It wouldn't look very good in Vegas. But with Hashem, we do have good odds. With Hashem, we can win the fight. So now, Rabbi Elazar says here that this verse is a problem for him. And the Zohar is going to go about trying to answer it by bringing up another question that's connected to this parsha, which is Ki Tisa et Rosh Bnei Israel. When you appoint a leader for the Jewish people, Lepikudehem, to their countings. Now, pikudim are also mitzvot, commands. They're also teams or collections. And that each group will appoint somebody as their leader. There's a numerical coefficient that takes place. You count the people, and then you pick a leader. And so many people get a leader. It's just like, any group in any political, system that's, it's trying to be fair. Okay? But what the Zohar goes on to tell us here is that a famous statement, Hayu, that we have a general principle that you'll see Orthodox Jews everywhere understand from this Zohar, that the blessing from above does not rest on something that's counted. That's why, in simple halachic terms, we're not supposed to count our money, to sit around and count money. Now, you could say, I need to count my money to know how much I have before I go shopping, and that's true, and you do need to. There's no mitzvah to show up at the counter without enough money. We're not talking about that type of counting. We're talking about people that just like to count their money. They like to look and see how much there is and count it again. And it's not about needing to prepare yourself for a purchase. It's about putting a number on a thing. So what's the problem? Why doesn't the blessing from above want to rest on something that's been counted? Why do you think? Well, you see, when we count something, we're giving it a limitation. We're giving it a gvul, it's called in Hebrew. We're giving it a status or a position. In Kabbalah, it's also a vessel. And when we count something, we're saying in a certain way that we have power over it. If I count people, suddenly I feel like, I know what we have in this room. There's 25 people. There's a certain power that comes from counting, especially people, which we're forbidden to count. And we're learning here, though, that the idea of blessing is above counting. The idea of an upper world blessing from Hashem onto the physical plane needs not to be counted, because it's from a place above counting. And the idea of blessing is not to be counted. So when we hear miracles like we see in the Tanakh, where the prophet Elisha gave oil to the Shunammite, and she was able to receive as much oil as she had blessings. But there was no counting of the oil. We have 10 liters. We have 20 liters. Now we're up to 50 liters. Wow. No, there's no counting like that. because the oil is flowing to the grace of Hashem, and the blessing of the prophet is connected to that numberlessness, let's call it. And so blessing automatically precludes counting. And especially when it comes to people, and the Zohar goes on to tell us that the Jewish people, when they count themselves, they bring on a plague. It's not a good thing to count people, especially Jews, because we are from a place above counting. And if we receive the blessing first of God, by counting we lose it. So what does this Torah? It tells us that we do what's called machasit shekel. We put a coin, each person gives a coin, and then we count the coins, so we don't count the people. So we effectively are able to reach a basic numerical understanding of how many people are involved in any particular thing, but it's by the counting of coins and not the counting of souls. Because every soul is a whole world complete, and we do not have right to count anyone. How does it feel? Why did the Nazis, Yamach Shemam, why did they put numbers on people? How does it feel to be a number? It's dehumanizing. It's degrading. And that is forbidden to us. So when you put a number on something, you're kind of putting it down a little bit. So we give the half shekel, the coins are counted, then the blessing will remain on Hashem, and the people are protected from any kind of plague. Okay. But our main idea here, this idea of the eyes of God, the ears of God, that there is a level where a person is so attached to God that he doesn't really see with the same vision that most of us look at the world. Nor does he hear things the way that we hear things. There's the famous story of a sage who came to the city after being away on a journey, and he came to the gates of the city and he heard a baby crying, and he thought to himself, I hope that's not my baby. And when the moment he had that thought, he said to himself, well, now I see that I don't truly have Ahavat Yisrael. Because if I feel the pain of my baby, why can't I feel the pain of your baby? And why is your baby's pain less than my baby's pain? And if I see other people that are suffering and I'm not suffering, what am I supposed to do? Thank God for not suffering? Of course not. We're supposed to join in other people's struggles, and that relieves part of the pain of the struggle. And so you see that because we're on this integrated network of soul, we're constantly adding and to and receiving from the network. And what are we receiving and adding to? Compassion. Compassion is the currency that's moving between us. And being able to feel the other person's place. And being able to not judge them by the parameters of my own constrictions. Because that's what most of us do when we judge. We're just looking through a very narrow lens. And once we get rid of that lens, we say, I don't see the way that I'm supposed to see. I want to see the way Hashem sees. I want to see with that compassion. I want to hear the cry. I want to be able to join it. And it doesn't mean I fall into depression because someone else is suffering. But it does mean that I take the time and the effort to open my heart. And when we do that, we see the absurdity of counting people and even the absurdity of counting money for the sake of, knowing how much you have. So the Zohar is really connecting for us many levels at once, like it always does. The simple act of counting, the simple creating a vessel to receive blessing, the idea of appointing a leader. How does that fit into all of this? Ki Tisa Rosh B'nai Yisrael. And Rosh B'nai Yisrael, Rabbi Nachman teaches us, of course, is the first letters of the word Rebbe. Well, King David is the ultimate example of this. And who was King David? Well, everybody understood that King David had the broadest vision, the most compassion, the most experience, and who had suffered the most. And so, now, of course, he was appointed king as a young man, but he wasn't accepted for, I think, 13 years before the entire nation actually accepted him as king. It's a big difference to have the prophet pour oil on your head and for the rest of the people in the country to accept it. So when you look for a leader, I think it's a very important thing to understand what we're looking for. We're looking for somebody who's connected to the network, somebody who has the compassion and whose vision is not a human vision, but rather who's been blessed with the eyes of God to see the world properly, in balance, in understanding, with wisdom, with patience, and to understand that just because we like the idea doesn't mean we're there. We have to do the work. We have to do the work of transforming our own vision to have compassion, at least so that when we come home and we hear a baby crying, we're not hoping it's somebody else's baby, because that's obviously a limited place to see the world. So this Shabbat, we should all be blessed with that vision and those ears to hear and to allow ourselves to feel. It doesn't mean we go into a 2-week trance about feeling somebody else's pain, but just for the moment of the experience itself. To have that compassion is to bring God into the presence of every moment, and then you'll be doing what the rabbis were doing when they saw their friends on the road. Oh, the Shekhinah is there. Let's wait. Are we not going to sit with the divine? Are we not going to speak words of Torah with the divine? And halavai, God willing, we could look at our friends that way, and ultimately we will see that they do carry the Shekhinah, even though it might be hidden from us, well, most of the time. But it really is there if we just learn how to look. God bless you all. Have a great Shabbat, a wonderful, peaceful time. Right now in Eretz Yisrael, the weather is amazing. It feels like the winter's saying goodbye, but I wouldn't count on it too fast. But it's a wonderful experience to have spring coming. The almond trees are blossoming, and the grass is all green, and you feel life coming back, and well, that's what we're all about. And you should also remember that when it resists the urge to count things, because when you resist that urge, you're actually making a vessel to receive above the level of counting. Have a great Shabbat. We'll see you next week on all the platforms. Shabbat Shalom.